Okay, so in this series of videos, we're going to be looking about problems associated with the criminal justice system, with issues around crime control and punishment. And we're going to start by thinking about the basic nature of deviance and deviant behavior. When I was an undergrad, one night I actually went out to a party with a friend of mine. I was a pretty indoor kid, but occasionally I did go out, and it was a newer friend I didn't know very well. There was liquor involved. We were all of age, of course. But I did notice that some people kept going into another side room of this apartment and closing a door. And I just thought it was kind of odd. Um, and I don't exactly remember how I found out, but I do remember the feeling when I found out that they were actually going in there to snort cocaine. And I remember the feeling at that time of being kind of in a gut reaction, kind of like scared or alarmed or something. Not exactly like frightened, but they had even a physical response because I realized they were doing something that I considered to be fairly deviant, and snorting cocaine and doing illegal drugs, which I didn't do any of. So not that long ago, it was actually legal to do cocaine. Um, if you watch any Sherlock Holmes mysteries, for example, or read any of the old Sherlock Holmes mysteries, you'd find that in the original mystery series, Sherlock Holmes, the famous detective, actually does cocaine, or is it heroin? I forget which. Um, because it was perfectly legal to do so to get some from the pharmacist. In this instance, this was probably a moderately deviant behavior, but to me, it seemed very risky, very problematic, and even a little bit scary because people are doing something that's illegal. In this instance, it's something I've been told by the law is wrong and deviant. So as I got to know this person a bit more, I found out they actually worked in an office that dealt drugs. And as I was doing a sociological study with this person, I just kind of observed their behavior. And over time, I got to know people who did these drugs, and they were all actually kind of normal people by and large, which I thought was interesting. And as I got to know more of these people, I became less uh, alarmed by the behavior to the point where it didn't faze me much anymore, and it didn't bother me in the same way it first did. So over time, that deviant behavior became less deviant to me as I became more familiar with it. As we'll see, this is an example of differential association of how we think about what's deviant. So in this video, I want to think a little bit about the different types of crime and how we treat them in our society before we really get into the problems of the criminal justice system. Right? What's in the name and the label of a crime, of street crime versus suite crime committed in office suites? Is it just a question of different kinds of deviance? So we talk about street or index crimes. These are called index crimes because the way the FBI indexes them. This is the crime we're most familiar with and we often are most concerned with. Interpersonal crime, where someone might rob you, hold you up at gunpoint, rob your house, shoot you, assault you. Those kind of everyday crimes. Um, the ones we hear about in the 6 o'clock news, basically. White collar crime refers to crime committed by those who essentially are in offices. The distinction between white collar and blue collar used to be that blue collar people wore denim shirts like the stuff jeans are made out of because they worked in the factories, versus the white collar people were those in the offices wearing suits. So white collar crime pretty simply is crime committed by people wearing suits. It can be money laundering, fraud, embezzlement, kind of cooking the books at a company, um, all kinds of things that can be committed by people in larger corporations. And we can also think about hate or cyber crime. A hate crime is a crime that's uh, committed towards a minority group or towards a particular group and motivated by hate for that group. So gay bashing or anti-Jewish crimes, for example. And then cyber crimes are those crimes that are much more common today that are committed online or through technology. So setting up fake IDs. Um, and there's even stuff in a kind of gray area, like trolling, bullying, trying to manipulate elections. So it's worth thinking which of these is worse or less severe for society. Are street crimes always worse than white collar crimes? Certainly, street crimes tend to get much harsher punishment. If you commit fraud, you go often to a civil court, not to a criminal court. If you steal from someone on the street, both are kinds of stealing, but if you steal from someone on the street, you go to a criminal court and potentially prison. The 2008 stock market crash was created by people essentially cooking the books on their mortgages and their mortgage lending. It was very fraudulent behavior, brought down the entire economy, and yet only one person actually went to jail for it. Versus people who rob for starvation just to get by, who deal in drugs, who are in the black and gray markets in society. They're technically illegal behavior, but is it actually worse?